People want to be able to use their influence, but few people are really truly equipped. First, you have to learn to lead yourself. Before you can really lead anyone else, you need to implement those success habits and strategies in your own life. And then you can start helping other people, whether that's in groups, teams, organizations on a broader scale.
So many people say, well, you should have a good mindset. Well, what does that look like? How do I actually begin making those changes? We believe that in order to live life at its best, we have to first be inspired by the purpose that we were created for. I think everybody asks that question of, why am I here? What is my purpose on earth? We want to first discover that and then use that to drive us forward.
A lot of people will talk about purpose and career as if they're one and the same thing. Anytime you change your role or you lose your title or you go through a different season of life, then people can feel like lost and their identity is now in question and they just don't understand where they are or who they're going to be. We like to look at purpose as underlying themes, whether that's you're good at being a teacher, you're a connector, you're somebody who's an advocate, or you're a communicator. You'll see a couple of different themes that continue showing up throughout your life. You can live those out in many different ways, but when you view it that way, it allows you to be flexible and to use those skills in different formats and not be so rigid and stuck to an idea that can cause you to lose that sense of identity.
When you go back to any person's success, regardless of their starting point, regardless of what their talent level was, it always comes down to everything that starts in their mind.
Before we jump into our next conversation on the Wolf and Bull podcast, I want to take a quick moment to thank each and every one of you for tuning into this episode. All of the team here at Dare More Media prides themselves in the work that they put into each and every one of our episodes. And the best way to possibly help us is to leave a like, a comment, and a subscription. Our main priority is to facilitate honest conversation with captivating individuals that brings each and every one of our listeners and viewers a nugget of advice, wisdom, or insight that they can take away from every one of our episodes. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode of The Wolf and Bull.
I am Lauren Henry.
And I'm Candice Henry.
And we are the co-founders of Aretios, which is a company dedicated to training the next generation of extraordinary leaders to live lives of purpose, influence, and adventure.
Candice, Lauren, why does your work matter?
That's a great question. So I'd actually like to take you back to how we got into it, because I think that is really what drove us to start our business. So initially, our story kind of starts at the beginning. We're sisters, which is a really fun bonus to being able to work together with a coworker that you really enjoy. But the two of us really got started in this whole journey together because our parents introduced us to leadership at a young age. And I remember sitting in the backseat of the car, driving to ballet lessons with self-talk tapes going on in the background and taking notes at our parents' businesses, conferences, and always just trying to learn because they had made it such a priority in their life and wanted to share that with us as young girls.
And so we started to see the benefits of learning those concepts of goal setting and mindset and thinking positive, all of that at a young age. And we ended up going to a leadership training camp that Jenny knows as well, where kids from all over the world would learn about these concepts. And we started to apply it in our lives and also have it reinforced with our parents. And we saw such a dramatic improvement. And that is what started to pique our interest in this, because we saw the impact it was having on the choices that we were making and the lifestyle that we were living, and how our peers often were not making those same choices and weren't living in the same way. And so it was having a profound impact on our lives. And we're like, why aren't more young people getting exposed to this information? And that started to plant the seeds that we maybe wanted to do something with this.
So after we got these years of training, we ended up joining the staff there and got a chance to begin practicing that by helping other young people from around the world to learn these same skills. And that passion ended up leading us to get our master's in executive leadership and then eventually become professors and teaching college courses, university level courses in leadership. And so throughout all of our studies, we found that there was a younger voice, a younger perspective that was missing from the conversation. A lot of the leadership material was geared toward an older audience or a more corporate type of audience. And so we were like, wait a minute, we want to bring these same success strategies and skills to a younger demographic who's making these important decisions at that time in their life. And we'd love to equip them with the mindset strategy, with the long-term vision and some of the success skills that had helped us so much, we wanted to share that with other people.
And so we feel that that's what makes what we do so important, is because we're inspiring people, we are equipping them and empowering them to be able to figure out what their purpose is in life, and then to use their influence wisely, and then embrace the adventure of life as we know it, so that they can really enjoy it to the fullest.
That's awesome.
I love that you guys immediately launched into the fact that your parents were so pivotal in your later careers as being leadership experts. I think you and I, the three of us, all had very similar upbringings in the sense where our parents were very involved in trying to teach these things to us when we were very young. And how amazing is it that the two of you decided to turn it into something even larger than just, oh, I did that when I was 12 or 13. It was just some summer camp I went to and it was cool, or I met a couple people and it was fun, but it's really, really admirable.
Yeah, it is. So taken from your website, Aretios.com, your company's name is inspired by the Greek word arete, which means an attitude of excellence, virtue, and purpose, and the act of living up to one's potential. Can you walk us through how your company assists individuals in living up to their potential?
So one of the biggest things that we see is that people want to be able to use their influence. We live in a world where there are so many people on a platform and a lot of different connotations that come around this topic of influence, but few people are really truly equipped. And we feel like in order to do that, first you have to learn to lead yourself. So before you can really lead anyone else, you need to implement those success habits and strategies in your own life. And then you can start helping other people, whether that's in groups, teams, organizations, on a broader scale, be able to do that. So we like to come alongside people and first help them kind of understand purpose, and then get some of those foundational success habits, whether that's goal setting, building the right kind of mindset, and all those different fundamental things in place in your own life. And so we do that through various trainings, resources that we provide, products. That way we can equip people so they have the tools. That way when they get an opportunity and they're like, what do I do now? We've been right there to resource them so that they can make those wise decisions. They can make the most of those opportunities, and so that they can see opportunities and have the courage to seize them that other people might be afraid to, or might not even see because they haven't been developing those skills.
I've personally been a part of these workshops and they're so awesome. I can't even describe just even the visuals are, because I'm a visual learner for sure, have been so helpful. And then the knowledge, of course. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but I made sure I'm not just wearing the hat today.
We have ours too.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting to me because I've been around some of the similar messages that you guys have been around. I've gotten kind of a similar feel and the vibe of definitely finding goals and purposes in your life. I'd love to know what your guys' position is personally on kind of that. I don't want to say like explosion, but almost like saturation of that type of mindset in our society. I know that there's like, because I tend to be not critical or skeptical, but I tend to ask a lot of questions about people like that. So like Tony Robbins, for example, he has got a great smile. He's got a real winning smile, but but when it comes to winning smile, it kind of throws me off a little bit. So from my perspective, like, what is your guys' opinion on kind of that saturation of the market when it comes to positive thinking, positive mindset, and how does Aretios stay grounded without jumping to these often kind of lofty aspirations that some of these individuals who are motivational prescribe their listeners to aspire to?
Yeah, I think the goal for us is always to make things practical. That's something that we try to think about anytime we're creating a training, a resource, a product, whatever it is. We want people to actually have something that they feel, they understand, because I think that's a huge thing. A lot of people in the influential space, whether it's any type of influencer, but especially in our space of personal development and leadership, there's a lot of people who will say a lot of things that kind of pump you up and get you excited, but they don't really give any actionable advice of how to put it to work in your own life. So you get really excited, you get hyped up for a little bit, and then you come home and the motivation kind of wanes and the excitement starts to go away. And then you're like, okay, well, that was nice for the the weekend, or that was nice for the month, or however long you're able to stick with something, because there's not an actual plan of how to put it to work in your own life and get results. And so that's something that we actually struggled with for a long time of like, how do we do these things? So many people say, well, you should have a good mindset. Well, what does that look like? How do I actually begin making those changes? And so we wanted to create that roadmap, especially because we didn't necessarily have that. We were trying to read all the books. We were trying to listen to all the speakers. But until we actually sat down and said, okay, what are the main takeaways that will actually help us to start doing these things, putting it into practice, that we were like, I think this is what's missing.
Yeah, I definitely, like Candice said, that was something that we found in learning about these things and listening to other people, is that we'd be like, okay, I love that idea, but where is the how-to? Where is the step-by-step? Where is the fill in the blank, guide for how to do these things? And so we thought, okay, well, we're going to make it, because if other people are going to adopt this and to get the benefits, we're going to have to show them how. So that's where we started to synthesize and then create things that were easier to follow, so that it would be easier for people to create those new habits. Creating any kind of new habit is a challenge, right? You're already embarking on something that's a little bit of an uphill battle. And so the easier you can make it for yourself, the better your chances are to be able to implement that. And so many people follow the path of least resistance, and then they wonder why they are where they are. And so we try to do everything to make it practical, but also then to make sure that it's values-based and grounded in things that have been proven to work in our own lives and the lives of other people, so that we're not just spouting and spewing exciting things that won't do anything for you.
And how important is it? We both touched on this, but you're coming from personal experience too. You said that you had some struggles of some of this in your own life. So you're not coming from just like, I read this in a book and I'm just kind of word vomiting it back to you, right? You come from a place where you understand the same sort of mindset that people who are coming to you guys would usually have if they are in need of your services. So that's so important too. I think and from my perspective, that's something that a lot of people in the space, as you see these viral videos online, they're sometimes coming from a place where you're like, you don't have the same perspective I do.
Or they're coming from a place with someone who owns like 4 different yachts and is sitting in a darkly lit room, and they've got a cigar, and there's something to do with success in the background playing over what they're like whittling around a gold bar, like.
I'd love for us all to have 4 yachts.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
I'm all about that.
Yeah.
We got to do the necessary work to get there first.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's actually really good to hear, because when I read some of these, because I've read quite a few books that I would consider to be positive. And a lot of them there's some actionable ones, and then there's a lot that aren't. And it's good to hear that you guys kind of seem grounded in the practical stage of things, because there's way too many people online these days that are especially influential, be it from a theological perspective or from, a public speaker perspective, where they just kind of say a bunch of nonsense and everyone just applauds them. So
I think some of that also comes from us having our experience in teaching as professors, because we'll share things and the students are unafraid to say, well, how? Well, what does that look like? Or how am I supposed to do that? And they will ask the questions of why and how and what do I do? And so we have to be able to explain and apply it to their own life situations. And it can't just be like, well, this is a good idea, or you should believe it because I said so, or because everybody shares it. We have to have the ability to explain it in a practical way. And I think that's helped us to really take that into account anytime we're creating or teaching or sharing things.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it also ties into the next question. Can you tell us more about the core principles of Aretios, purpose, influence, and adventure? What motivated you to choose those as your guiding pillars?
So these are actually 3 things that we have seen as such important values to us personally, that we actually decided to shape our whole business around those same core values, because really we believe that in order to live life at its best, we have to first be inspired by the purpose that we were created for. I think everybody asks that question of, well, why am I here? What is my purpose on earth? And so we want to first discover that and then use that to drive us forward. So once we have that element of purpose in place, then we want to be equipped to positively impact and influence other people around us, whether that is on a grand global scale or that's right where you are with your family and friends. we still want to utilize our influence well. And then, like Lauren had mentioned earlier, we want to be empowered to embrace the adventure of life. Life was meant to be exciting and an adventure. And so those things have really shaped our lives in such a powerful way that we were like, you know what? I think that this is so important, and so many people are missing one or more of these components. And that's why life seems unfulfilling, or they have a lot of disillusionment around certain aspects of their life or certain circumstances because they haven't put those three things into alignment in their life.
I can see that in people around me all the time. I've seen that in myself. That you use the perfect word, disillusionment. I think there's waves of life too that hit like that. So when you have someone or a program or something in your life that you're regularly going back to, I mean, it makes all the difference.
I think that definitely happens, especially around the topic of purpose. And I think that comes down to how we define purpose. A lot of people will talk about purpose and career as if they're one and the same thing. And that's what can lead to that disillusionment. Anytime you change your role or you lose your title or you go through a different season of life, then people can feel like lost and their identity is now in question and they just don't understand where they are or who they're going to be. And so we like to look at purpose as more so as underlying themes. And whether that's you're good at being a teacher, you're a connector, you're somebody who's an advocate, or you're a communicator, you'll see a couple different themes that continue showing up throughout your life. And you can live those out in many different ways throughout the various seasons of your life. But when you view it that way, it allows you to be flexible and to use those skills in different formats and not be so rigid and stuck to an idea that can cause you to lose that sense of identity and kind of be plunged into a tunnel of confusion and doubt when things in your life change or when roles or seasons change.
In your guys' opinion, why do you think that, and maybe this is just an American thing, but why do you guys think that people might become disillusioned like that? Because I feel like the identity thing of I am a doctor and that's who I am type thing is maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like it's hyper focused here in the United States, especially within our culture. And maybe it's an educational thing, and maybe it has to do with how we teach. But I've found that to be something that's pretty common, where people get attached to their occupation, and then once that shifts and changes, it's as if the entire world has become, a death spiral of depression. And I've tried my hardest to figure out why that is, because I'm just, tooting my own horn. I don't suffer from that. I don't know why.
That's good.
I don't know why. So yeah, I'd love your opinion on that.
I would say the first thing is I think it goes down to a priority structure. So we talk about life being it's kind of sectioned into 5 major elements. So career, relationships, health, spirituality, and lifestyle. And I think in our country, a lot of people put career as one of the highest of priorities out of those 5, whereas perhaps in other places, the priority structure is a little bit different about how they value those different areas. And so maybe they don't elevate career above all those others of relationship and health and lifestyle. Maybe the priority values are a little bit different. And I think because there's so much emphasis put on career, and every human being has this desire to feel valued, to feel belonging. If we aren't seeing our value as something that's innate in who God made us to be, and we put it in one of those areas, if your performance is lacking in your own opinion for whatever reason, then you're going to start to feel that. And a lot of people encounter that in any kind of transition in life, whether they're just graduating, they're changing careers, they moved, whatever it is, that's what causes people to feel that unsettledness in the purpose or like career category. But I think it's because our society puts so much emphasis on your achievement tends to look like how much money you're making, what your job is, like what title can you say to us? I mean, even when you're like, hi, nice to meet you. So what do you do? Like that's the first thing we looked at to define people and to gain a sense of perspective about who they are. And that can sometimes maybe contribute to this outcome of, maybe feeling unsettled in that category.
I think that's a tricky place to be too, because a lot of times maybe people are even chasing something that in the end isn't fulfilling, and they invest so many years of their life chasing this dream that they thought was going to be one thing, and they get to that pinnacle of success, or so they thought, and then they look around and they're like, wow, I missed it on so many other fronts. I missed it with my family or my health. And then you spend the rest of your time trying to bring that all back. And so it is an interesting thing I think we should evaluate as American society, and perhaps globally as well, that what are we actually trying to aim towards? And are we living the best life possible? And what does that look like for each of us? Because we all are going to have different priorities, but we want to make sure that we are moving forward as whole beings, not just career individuals, not just health-oriented individuals. Are we actually moving forward on all of those different aspects of our life?
Yeah, it's always been something that's just personally it's kind of confused me. And I don't mean in the sense of like I look down on people who struggle with that, because I'm sure like there might be some point in my life where I do have that instance where I'm like, man, things have shifted so much where I just have a hard time grasping. But I've always kind of seen life as like a flowing river, and I don't know what the end's going to be like. So might as well just kind of go with the flow. And if it's bad for a little bit, if you put a smile on your face, it'll be a little less bad. Of course, I'm telling myself that, and probably one of the most emotionally demanding times in our lives. But I do think that it's definitely interesting to kind of look at that from maybe for our viewers and listeners, look at that for their own lives, because I tend to think about it daily.
I think seasons of life. I've talked with Candice and Lauren about this before. There are just seasons of life that are harder and more challenging than others. Yep. And again, going back to the fact, if you have something you can fall back on. So if you're having like a struggle, like a very difficult time in your career, you know, you look at your spirituality, you look at your family, you look at something else.
Almost like a reset.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. Let's dive into that a little bit more. So say I'm off the street, fresh off the street, and I need some help. Okay, I'm seriously discombobulated, and I need some resetting. What would happen if I were to engage with you guys as a potential client? How would that go?
So we offer a variety of things. It would kind of look like many different options that are available. So we have online courses, and based on people's needs, we're able to share a variety of options that they might want to dive deeper into on different topics.
I'd probably recommend the Best Life Blueprint. That course in particular kind of lays the foundation there and helps people to look at what is my purpose, goals, lifestyle design, so that they make those decisions intentionally. I think a lot of people will start just making choices because something's available, something's in front of them, without kind of taking that long-term view and seeing, is it going to line up with where I want to be and who I want to become as a person? So probably that. And then like Candice was saying, there's other courses that then will help you with some of those foundational habits, like habits in general, or goal setting, or mindset, communication skills, all of those things to kind of start to build your toolkit so that you can make those changes in your own life and then be able to share them with other people.
Do you guys happen to have any success stories that have been potentially impactful to you that you could share?
Sure. I mean, there's all different kinds, either on a macro scale or a micro scale. But one person in particular that we worked with recently came to us to do some coaching. As Candice mentioned, this is another thing that we do in addition to courses. Sometimes we'll work with individuals. And this person was looking to get a new position. So they had been working remotely for a little while and were looking at a job that was going to require some in-person communication skills. And they were like, I need help. I haven't done this in a while. So we coached them on how to present and how to put it together and how to show up and use all of those nonverbals and presentation skills to make them feel confident, and also worked on mindset of how are you going to approach this? Because many times when we're approaching something important in our life, the nerves can get the best of us. So we worked on a little bit of that mindset training as well and coached them. And then they were able to do the interview and they got the job. And so it's exciting for us to be able to help somebody reach that next level in their own life, something that was really important to them, and be able to prepare them and then empower them to reach the success that they were looking for.
I can definitely relate to some of the job changes and things that are a little discombobulating was the word you used earlier.
Discombobulating. It's the word of the day.
It's so important that you revisit those things that you put on, especially post-COVID. I feel like that's a very common story that a lot of people have right now, as they've been away from other human beings except online. And it's like it's like learning how to do your ABCs all over again. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially if you're someone who was in like the corporate world, for example, who spent, X amount of years just learning the basics of that. And then you go home for 4 or 5 years. It's like, whoa, I need to start over from square one.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have gone through that. I mean, it's also because there's been a significant, outside of COVID, just a significant shift with technology and how we're starting to do things. I think with artificial intelligence and all that stuff, it's going to change how we communicate and how we create and how we solve problems. Not going to get too conspiratorial because the conspiracy side of me wants to jump right into
That's for another time.
Conversation. But yeah, it's definitely I understand that, something that you guys offer, the things and the courses that you guys offer are definitely needed, especially in the corporate world. I feel like there's kind of a, maybe like I don't want to say like soulless, but definitely close to like kind of soulless dredge that people go through with that. I mean, I came from the corporate world and now I own my own business. It shocked me so hard that I didn't want to work there anymore. So yeah, it's traumatized. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. So when it comes to working with your clients, are there any common obstacles when it comes to them finding their own purpose? I would have to guess there has to be like a common litany of issues.
Like a thread.
Yeah, like a thread.
Yeah, I think the first thing is definitely being connected to a specific job or a role. And they might need to go back to the beginning and kind of ask yourself these questions of, what do I actually enjoy doing? As you were mentioning, Cam, it's sometimes we get into this monotony. We get into doing all these tasks and we've just done them for so long. It's not that we even like them or not like them. We kind of lose a sense of who we are as people. And it's valuable to go back to the beginning and say, okay, what am I good at? First of all, and really be honest with yourself. I think sometimes we even lose that sense of self-pride in our work. And so we have to say, okay, like, realistically, what are my strengths? And then what do I enjoy doing? And then start to dream again. Start to kind of say, okay, let's just get all the ideas out on paper. And then from there, you can begin to narrow down what that might look like. But we have to go back and kind of start afresh and maybe even rediscover who we are as individuals after we've been through a routine for so long. And that's a common roadblock for a lot of people because they just get stuck in, well, I've been in HR for all these years, or I've been working in fill in the blank job. And they're like, okay, I want to move on, or I want to do something different, but I don't know how to get to that next step. Well, we have to go back to, who are you as a person, and what things do you really enjoy? What gets you excited? Then let's talk about, how do we build an entire lifestyle around that? Because it's not just the job. It's, what does my entire life look like? If I could have it the best possible version, what would that be?
Yeah, if you were a great communicator, how can you incorporate that into your profession, your family life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah, and dreaming again of, if you could have it, like Candice said, the ideal way, what would you want what would you want your life to look like in all of those 5 elements of it? And then once we start to paint the vision, then we can drill down into, okay, what are the goals going to be? What are the habits that you need to have in place? Who do you need to become in order to live that life? But we still have to first kind of paint the picture and figure out where it is that you want to go. Somebody once said, if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. You have to have some sort of target to aim towards. And I think a lot of people go through life aimlessly, or they even approach personal growth as just like, oh, it'll just happen. Well, we don't just happen to become the best version of ourselves. We have to be intentional about it. And so if we want to be intentional, then we have to start with a direction of where we're aiming towards, things that we want to improve, skills that we want to develop, and then make a plan and build in habits to get there.
Lauren, you had mentioned the macro versus micro and sort of this whole thing. And I would say to somebody who maybe was struggling with self-reflection on this exact sort of thing, you could take that same exact principle and apply it to a business when they don't have a vision or they don't have a mission statement. They have the same exact holdups when they're trying to grow that someone as an individual would feel if they're like, I'm just stuck. I'm just stuck in life. So going back to that, okay, why do you even want to do this in like a business standpoint is almost equivalent, at least in my point of view.
Absolutely.
Sure.
We just spoke at a conference the other day on focusing on that exact topic and talking about how we all need that sense of purpose, not only in our life, on that broad scale, but in your job.
Mm-hmm.
Why does it matter? Why does what you do matter? And how does your role help us achieve the overall goal? And when you have that sense of purpose, you treat your work differently. You show up with motivation because you know that what you're doing will value it. And then you're willing to work harder and give more because it's worth something. And that's motivating and exciting.
And I'd even say that's valuable for entrepreneurs as well, because sometimes we can get so caught up, and you guys can relate being entrepreneurs yourselves, in doing all the things that we can lose a sense of why we're doing. And we just have to take care of all the details and put out this fire and make sure this is running properly. And it's good for us to remind ourselves of that why behind the what on a regular basis. So that way we do stay motivated and inspired, and we remember who it is we're serving. And that can be the driving force that gets us through the endless to-do lists or the tough days.
When you're an entrepreneur, that's almost every day.
Yeah. No, I've come to determine that most of us don't even know what we're doing anymore. So it's just keep doing it. That totally, you're speaking to me right now. That it really is. So with your clients, and this is something that I think I see a lot when it comes to like inspiration and motivation, how do you avoid feeding into confirmation bias? And what advice do you have for people who might feel attracted to a larger than life message that isn't practical? So I'm sure you've had people that come to you and say, I want to be, I guess an anecdote. I want to be the next Michael Jordan, but I'm 5'4". How do you handle a situation like that?
Well, goals are designed to be something that inspires us. All of us are created as goal-seeking individuals. However, if your goal is completely impossible or it's too large and unattainable, then it actually becomes the opposite and it's demotivating. So if you wanted to say, like you were saying, okay, like I want to make $1 million by tomorrow. Well, if your business is at the level where it's grossing that much, okay, then maybe that's a realistic goal. If you're not making anything right now, that's going to be demotivating because you're going to wake up and see, I failed again. And you feel like you can't see any quick wins. People need to see quick wins. So we need things that stretch us, yes, but not are completely impossible. So we do try to help people look at that and say, people come to us with all sorts of, dreams and ambitions, like you said. And we're like, okay, well, let's scale it down. You can always start small and scale up. You can always do more. You can always get bigger and better, but let's at least get something on the board. Let's start to see progress, and then we can grow it from there.
I'm automatically thinking from the financial side. Is it called the snowball method?
Snowball effect.
Snowball effect,
yep.
Right? Where they argue the same thing. You try to see little successes first instead of immediately tackling your biggest dragon, the biggest monster under the bed. You look, okay, where can I start to, like, I woke up today and I did something that I accomplished something today. That's a great point.
So what would you say to people who maybe are starting off in the smaller area that have worked up and built to a place, but they've reached a plateau? How would you advise them to push through that?
I think getting them to kind of evaluate where it is they want to go. Sometimes, again, going back to that why. So why are you doing this? And then getting them to think long-term. That's something that we try to do ourselves when we're creating something or we're working with a client. Like, what's the end goal here? And that can help us to say, okay, now that we have kind of gotten this understanding of where we are currently, where do we need to go from here? And then get very specific about making those next steps. And they might be small steps, they might be big steps. But again, having that clear plan of action of, okay, I know where to go next. I know what my next step is, can sometimes help break through that plateau. Often it comes from assumptions or just a lack of clarity of where to go next.
I think also it's important to look at what's causing the plateau, because sometimes it's a case where what got me here worked to get me here, but it's not going to get me there for the next level. So you need to make adjustments and create new habits, try new strategies if you want to get a different result. But other times it's a case where you need to just stick it out. You're not giving it enough time. We remind ourselves often of the idea that success occurs in cycles. So there is a time period where you have to just work and you do the unseen, uncelebrated, unsung work for a while, and then it will pay off. And sometimes we want to quit in those moments because we look at somebody else and they're at a different point in the cycle. They're at the mountaintop point in the cycle and we're in the climbing point. And then we get frustrated because we forget that they also went through the climbing point, but at a different time. And so sometimes it's just that you need to stick it out and it feels like it's a plateau, but it's more like you have to give it enough time and then the result will come.
Yeah, as my grandfather always used to say, comparison is the thief of joy. My grandfather never said that. I found that online. But I have been saying it a lot. I'm going to say that to my daughter when she shows up. That'll be the first thing I say. Comparison's the thief of joy.
She'll repeat it back to you. Yeah, her first words.
So, when it comes to Aretios, influence is a huge facet of your guys' strategy. In a world of varied role models and the conceptions of influence, how do you define positive influence?
I think the first thing is what end result are you creating? So are you creating, we always say that leaders create more leaders. So are you creating more people who are having a positive impact on their spheres of influence? Something that actually, I think, Jenny, that you would remember is when we were growing up, we always learned to leave people, things, and places better than you found them. And we used to do this through a beach cleanup. And so all of us would be cleaning this beach together and people would look at this and be like, what are you doing? Like, why are you picking up cigarette butts and trash? And even if it's not yours, you're still going out of your way to do that. And I think that's a great picture of what it looks like to be a positive influence on people, on situations. Like, how can you make a bigger, better impact? How can you leave something better than it was when you found it?
Yeah, like when people encounter you, are they encouraged? Are they inspired? Do they feel better because they interacted with you? Or was it a nothingness, like it didn't have any impact? Or was it a negative impact? Even when we think about, some of our travels, for example, people who have treated, say, having us as their table when we're out to eat at a restaurant, some people treat it as just another table. Other people treat it as they make it a wonderful experience. And then we take that home as a memory that we remember for years. And they probably went through multiple tables that night. But if they made an intentional choice to make it a memory for somebody, then they positively influence that. And look how far-reaching that impact is. So we remember for years, and it was just a table and the experience that a server helped us have at a restaurant. But they can positively use that influence, or they can be dismissive and unattentive and make it a negative experience and have a negative influential impact, or they could just be nothingness. So it all comes down to small things about when we interact with people. That's the best place to start, is your example and your interactions with other people. Are you leaving them better than when you found them?
So follow-up question for that, because I see in our society, especially with our generation and the generation after us, there seems to be a disassociation with that type of mindset, in the sense that, at least in my experience, I've seen people be positive and engaging with people who are their friends, but I don't see it with people they don't know. Why do you think that might be?
Oftentimes I think that there's just a lack of example. They haven't been taught. And I've noticed that so much when we have been working with our students. It's not so much that they don't want to, it's that nobody has ever stopped long enough to teach them what respect looks like, what the right way to communicate with somebody looks like. And it's not that they're closed off to it. They want to learn, but they're not going to example it if they've never been taught.
And they probably don't realize how their actions are being perceived. Mm-hmm. We see that a lot, even in little things of like, somebody does something for you or sends you an email or goes out, you need to respond or you need to say thank you. Otherwise, it looks like you didn't value it. Or if somebody's up there talking, you need to look at them. You can't be on your phone, or you shouldn't be looking somewhere else. Like, you want to give them, goes back to the golden rule, treat other people as you would want to be treated. But we have to be cognizant of how other people are taking that. It's kind of like emotional intelligence. Like, how are your actions impacting other people? We have to look outside our little bubble and our comfort circle of friends and people that we like, and think about, when I'm interacting with other people, the way that I respond to them, is that making them feel better? Because that's all going to be a reflection of me. Like, that's building your reputation, your personal brand. And we can't have that disassociation, like you said. Otherwise, you're going to have a huge inconsistency there in who you say you are and who other people see you as.
I think it's a good checkpoint for all of us too. Like, are we also exempling that? Because we are the role models to that up and coming generation. And so I think it's a good little self check-in and be like, okay, is my example one that's worth following? And if it isn't, there's plenty of time to change. But they are watching and listening and taking cues from what we're all doing, for sure.
And when they don't immediately fall in line, just keep reaching out your hand, right?
For
because
sure.
Especially if you're dealing with the younger generation or younger than us, younger than you, sometimes, have you ever heard of a teenager that doesn't like authority? Just keep reaching out your hand, even when you feel like you're not making progress.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because you're basically kind of saying what I've been thinking the last like 7 months about the expected arrival of our little kiddo eventually. I was talking to my one of my good friends the other day about it, like, because he's in the same situation. He's also expecting his first child, and man, you start thinking about the things that you do just kind of by yourself or just randomly, not even considering it. And then when you start to go down the path of children, you start to consider how every single thing you do could ruin them as a person. And it becomes completely devastating. So it's definitely good to envision and make sure and reevaluate and have some self-awareness, because I don't see, and it's unfortunate, but I don't really see a lot of that self-awareness today. And I think, courses that you guys offer, and at least what you're talking about right now, just seems completely relevant to what people kind of need, because some people are just not getting it anywhere. Some people might be getting it from like a belief system. And then there's other people that maybe already have it, but might need to reframe it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it just goes back to the little habits. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the daily, is that power of reflection. And I think that's a great place to go back to and just say, okay, what happened today? Is this something that I can, learn from and make sure that my example is worth following? What did I learn? Did I treat somebody the right way today? Did I not? Did I handle a situation the most calm way possible, or perhaps not? And taking time to reflect on those things throughout the day is a really valuable thing that, regardless of your age, can be a hugely beneficial practice.
When we first started looking at what eventually we'd come to call the 4 power practices, which is what the daily focus is on, we were looking at what are the common denominators between all these people that have been successful throughout all different industries and all times in the world. There were common habits that we kept seeing repeated again. And one of them was reflection. And that one surprised us at first, because we would see that people would even schedule full days of reflection, or even like a week. And we're like, it seems counterintuitive at first to just take all that time, just sit there and think. And like, it seemed at first like you're doing nothing. And then we realized that that is what enables us to gain all the wisdom and experience from life's successes and failures, because otherwise we can just keep going through life with all these experiences and not get any better because of it. And so you can get year after year repeated over again instead of 5 years of experience. You got 1 year repeated 5 times because you didn't pay attention to the lessons that it was trying to teach you. And so that's why we tried to make it easy for people by just making it a daily thing that you think about. An idea that you had, a win from the day, something you learned, something you observed. And just by getting into that habit, then we become more aware and then more able to apply those lessons and become better versions of ourselves, because we are engaging in that self-awareness, like you were saying, Cam.
That's really good. Now, you guys talk a lot about mindset. Why should people, especially the next generation, pay close attention to their mindset?
Honestly, this is the biggest thing that guarantees success. Like, hands down. And I know that's a big statement to make, but when you go back to any person's success, regardless of their starting point, they could have been behind the line, at the line, ahead of the line, regardless of what their talent level was, it always comes down to everything that starts in their mind. And so one of the things that has been radically valuable and transformative in our life has been the evaluation of the input that we take in on a regular basis. Like, what are we watching, reading, listening to, talking about, all of those things? A lot of people say, well, that doesn't matter. That doesn't impact me. I can listen to these things or watch these things and it doesn't have an effect. It does, whether or not we acknowledge that it does.
Our minds are so powerful, and everything that we take in, whether we are consciously taking it in or not, is being stored. And that is the raw material that we are giving our brains to work with. And that's what gradually builds those beliefs that shape the perspectives. And then that influences every action that we take. It influences how we feel about ourselves, how we treat other people. And so it's so important to get that right. If you're looking for a small thing that you can do to get big results, input is it. That will shape your mindset. And like Candice said, we have to be more intentional. We can't just be continuing to say, oh, well, I know it's funny, or I know it's fake, or I know that's not real. Our words have power, images have power. So if you are continuing to put in, just as you think about what you eat, you continue to put junk in, you're going to get junk out. And so if you put junk input in, you're going to get junk input out. So if you don't like the way that your life is, you don't like the direction that things are going, we always say to ourselves, man, we got to check our input. Am I looking at too many things that are negative? Am I listening to things that are not contributing to the way that I want to see life and the person that I want to become? And it's a quick switch. Like, you can start to make those edits in your own life. We can control those things, whether it's walking away from conversations or changing some of those other areas of media that we consume. All of that contributes to mindset. And the more we reinforce certain ideas, the stronger they get, and the easier it becomes for our brain to, again, think those same thoughts. And that begins to shape our beliefs, and that influences our actions.
If you think about, every action we take first originated as a thought in our brain. And so what I think kind of begs the question, well, what influences our thoughts? And that is the input that we take in. It's funny, one of the trainings that Lauren and I have done will show two sets of words. And one set of words has a lot of like harsh, intense, negative connotation to them. And we ask people, when you look at these words, how do you feel? And immediately people have this like visceral physical response to these words. And then we shift and show them a second set of words, and those have a lot happier connotation, like celebration or family or vacation or whatever it is. And everyone's like, oh my gosh. And you can actually physically watch people's shoulders relax as they view that second set. It's amazing how you can visually see the impact that all of our input has on us on a physical level as well.
Everything you just said, my brain immediately went to Instagram Reels, TikToks,
doom scrolling. It's not even just those anymore. It's almost every app that has any sort of social media aspect of it. Plus, even ones that didn't. You have things like Spotify that have the same endless scroll. You have things like, I just saw the other day, Uber Eats. They're going for the same exact thing. You can just endlessly scroll until you find a restaurant that strikes your fancy. And that garbage in, garbage out, or junk in, junk out, you were saying, Lauren, it's not just a younger generation thing. I would argue it's every generation that has access to this. Yeah. It's this addiction that you start seeing something. And even if you don't want to see it, if you stick to it long enough, you now have algorithms that keep feeding it to you over and over and over again. And it's so easy to just stumble into that same exact endless, you said doom scroll. Yeah, well, and this is from a young adult till now. I'm still, a young adult, I guess. Probably more of a mature, older adult now. I'm 32. But I've seen the world as a play in moderation, right? So there's a myriad of things that you could engage in, some good, some bad, some vices, some not. But it's all about being able to control that and being able to have some level of self-restraint, right? And I think that the champion on both ends today for people who are all about just engaging in whatever and people who are all about suppressing whatever is not really restraint. It's more just go, heels to the ground, tired of the road, rather than actually understanding that there are some instances where things are appropriate and some instances where they're not. What would you say to people who take more of a a lax perspective on garbage in, garbage out?
I think evaluate your lifestyle right now and truly ask yourself, am I moving in a direction in these different aspects of my life that I'm happy with? Because a lot of times I think people don't realize the impact that something like that mindset would have because they haven't really stopped to evaluate the impact that it already is having. And it's one of those things that we have to say, okay, is this helping me be a better person, or is it taking away from the way that I want to be? Because I think deep down, everybody knows who they would love to be, the best version of themselves, what that looks like. And many times we just kind of forget about that because we're so busy or we've gotten comfortable. And if you even look at, there's a lot of studies out today that have shown how a huge component of the mental health problems that we're seeing, especially in the next generation, or even just thought struggles that people deal with, often originate from what they allow into their mind. And so I think it's valuable to just step back for a moment and say, okay, am I happy with where I'm at? If not, this is a great area where we can start taking some ownership and saying, okay, I don't want to just allow whatever to come through the gates of my mind, my senses, right? And so to really think for ourselves, I think that's something that we're missing, especially in the next generation, is they're so quick to just accept things. And we need to be willing to not just take things at face value and say, okay, great, I either agree or I disagree, but actually be curious again and say, well, why? And is this something that is valuable to who I want to become, where I want to go? If it isn't, then we should probably make some edits to what that looks like.
And I would say try it. Try it for 30 days and see if it makes a positive difference. See how it changes who you are, how you feel in your life. And then you can evaluate from there, if I like this version of myself better, and if I see things go away and I'm not struggling with certain things as much, then maybe you've seen now the choices that you need to stick to and the things that you want to adjust going forward.
I guess the reason I say that is because my family was and to some degree, still is very regimented in how they think in some ways. And I'm not professing to say either is better or worse. I've just merely taken kind of a position in my life where I think it's always better to walk the fence than to be one way or the other. And not in all instances, but in a lot of kind of less hyperbolic stances, just because I see this. This is what I had a conversation with your dad, my father-in-law, Chris, otherwise known as the Bull, the sign behind me. Him and I always had this conversation of, where is that line between, as we talked about earlier, practical advice and goal setting, and then what I would probably prescribe to be toxic positivity, right? Where it's consistently always positive. There's no real analysis of the emotions that we go through. And my whole perspective has always been, you're going to go through life. Life is going to hit you sometimes, and sometimes you have to feel it. And it's not fun, but it also doesn't mean that you should just be completely depressed. It just means you should go with the flow. So that's kind of why I asked that question, because I don't really see, and I liked your answer, but I don't really see a lot of solidified answers from the space of personal development in that area.
I think to that topic, one of the things that we typically say is that, yes, you need to be realistic in understanding and evaluating where you are. You have to be real with yourself at what is your starting point? What is the situation? What are we working with? You can't deny the facts here. But once you have addressed what the situation is, it now becomes your choice if you're going to stay in that, you're going to stay wallowing there, or you're going to get in solution mode and figure out how to get yourself out of there. Some people don't want to get in solution mode. We see that.
It's true.
And so they just like having an excuse. They like having a problem. They like having something to tell people that they're dealing with. And for whatever reason, maybe even because of things that society has promoted, oh, so-and-so deals with this. And so then it seems cool suddenly. They like to have something. And that's a choice that they've made. And therefore they hold on to and carry those issues with them. And and consequently the consequences and downsides of those issues too. So I think, yes, you have to acknowledge where you are. You have to be real and truthful about that. But then it is your choice. Do you stay there or you get in solution mode and get out of there?
I think it's one of those things like people often talk about, well, I feel this way and my feelings are valid. And yes, you can have feelings about a situation or a circumstance, and it is okay to feel those things. However, our feelings are not always factual. In fact, most times they are not factual. And so it's okay to feel those things. But then, like Lauren was saying, we have to make that choice as to whether or not we want that to then dictate what our response is going forward, how we view ourselves, how we interact with others. Just because we feel something doesn't necessarily mean it's even the actual reflection of what is happening in that situation at the moment.
I think one of the most empowering life truths is to understand that we choose how much something affects us. Because you can see people all over the world who encounter the exact same situation. Some people come out better because of it. Other people are crushed by it. And it's all about, again, it goes back to mindset, how they view it, the perspective they take, and then what that does to the actions that flow from that. So I think it is a choice. And I think it comes back to your mindset and how much you're going to allow something to ruin your life or to make you wiser and stronger because of it.
I'm sure everyone here has probably heard the story of the dog sitting on the nail. No, maybe.
I have.
Okay, probably. The short version, my dad used to tell me this all the time when I was younger and complaining about anything. He would basically just say the dog would sit on the porch and it would be whining and whining and whining. Someone would walk on by. Yeah. And then say to the owner, your dog is so upset. What's wrong with it? Oh, he's just sitting on a nail, but it doesn't hurt enough, or he doesn't care enough. He doesn't want to get up and move. And it just related to the same. Some people have some serious problems in their life, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt them enough to change, or they don't have the desire to change.
Well, I also think it's incentivizing today, because we talked about careers early on how important that is to people's identity. I think things are switching in a sense now where it's almost about what problems you're going through that are important to your identity. And in most instances, I've tried to remain stoic when it comes to things that are just kind of frustrating to deal with. Now, there are some instances where you can't because it's just overwhelming. But I think the approach that you guys are talking about of being able to ingest and then move on and make a decision to move forward is what everyone should do. Keeps the world turning. I got a few more questions. How would Aretios recommend staying accountable to personal development goals over the long term, especially when it comes to distractions and competing priorities that their clients might face?
I think one of the biggest things that has helped us is the daily, like Jenny was showing earlier, because what that does is it helps us on a daily basis to go back to and reinforce the right kind of habits. So it goes through gratitude on a daily basis. That helps us to see life through the right kind of lens. It helps us the morning when we write down 3 things we're grateful for, then we start to look through life for, wow, what am I grateful for? Oh, there's another thing that is a blessing and a good thing in my life. Then it goes through goal setting, keeping the why behind the what in the forefront of our focus. Affirmations of who am I becoming? Who do I need to become as a person? And what am I reinforcing there? And then reflection. And by doing those things on a consistent basis, that helps you to stay accountable to that. Like, did I write it in there again? Where am I on my progress? Accountability is so important. It actually, if we have something to hold us accountable, can increase our chances of success, studies show, by 95%. So we do need that. Some people they have enough self-discipline to kind of hold themselves accountable. Other people need another person to check in with, or they need an app, or they need a reminder, or they need a little sheet that they can, X off all the days that they've done it to see the little streak there. Find what works for you, but have something so that you can really stick to it instead of start and stop. Because once you get that momentum going, it becomes a habit. And then habits, the way that it works is that our brain uses them as an energy saving technique. And so it becomes an unconscious choice instead of a conscious one. So if we can build in the right habits, then success can become habitual and part of who we are and how we operate on a daily basis. And then it's so much easier to get the results and to make the right choices.
I just think back to like personal scenarios where this is what I'm talking about. You have to have this same sort of mindset shift in order to get through challenging times. Otherwise, you're just going to be in the swamp of life, mindset swamp.
Oh, final question. No one wants to be in the mindset swamp. For our listeners interested in beginning their journey of personal development, what advice or first steps would you recommend?
I think figuring out first that you don't have to wait until you get into a specific role or a certain moment in your life where you're like, okay, now is my chance. First of all, you're never too early, and actually you're never too late to start learning and growing and developing yourself. So the best way to start is to realize the power in the small things. So like Lauren was talking about, those habits, that starts with small things that we do on a regular basis. So making sure that we are thinking about who it is we want to be, where we want to go, and making some notes of that. Going back to those simple tweaks with our mindset, evaluating your input. And that's something that we practice on a regular basis. I even like to do it every couple of months and just kind of think through the things that are part of my input on a regular basis and just say, okay, is this helping me get better, or is it keeping me back from where I want to go? That's an easy thing that we can all do regardless of what our starting point is.
I would also say too, decide on that direction. That way you have something to aim towards. You can start setting goals because you know where it is that you want to go. And then once you set a direction, patience. We keep coming back to that all the time because sometimes the goals won't be achieved on your timetable, or you look around and then that can frustrate you if you get into comparison thinking. So just having the patience, because sometimes the opportunity isn't ready for you yet. You might feel you're ready and there's other people or things that need to be shifted or brought into the picture that aren't there yet. Or maybe there's still lessons that you need to learn or skills that you need to develop. So be willing to be patient and see your current circumstance as a training ground for your next promotion in whatever area of life that is that you're seeking to level up in. Be patient and learn the lessons from where you're at. That way you are ready to take on the next level with skill, strength, and confidence.
I think of it as like being in the gym and you want to maybe up your weights that you're using. And if you walk in on day one and you're like, all right, I'm going to bench press 200 pounds, you're going to be killed. Like you're not even going to be able to start. That next level would crush you, right? And the same is true with our aspirations in every aspect of life. Sometimes we think we're ready for whatever that next level is. We think we're ready for the next promotion, or we're ready to take a leap in whatever aspect of life, and we have not built the strength and the fortitude yet, or even the persistence necessary to withstand what's coming and what's going to be expected of us at that next level. We have to do the training sessions. We have to push through the obstacles of this season first, get the strength, get the lessons, then we're able to handle that next level with ease and skill, and it won't crush us in the process.
That was the perfect analogy for Candice.
Gym one. No, it's funny as I'm starting to get into the stage at the gym where people are like asking me questions, which is nice. Mm-hmm. But it's also like awesome. It's also kind of funny because I tell them where I started, and like I'm not small. Like I wasn't small when I started, but there's some workouts that I did where I started really, really light, and you've got to work up. You can't not work up. And even when you can lift heavier, you have to work up and you have to keep track. So everything you're saying is just right in line with my gym journey.
Well, I immediately think back to
with Cam.
Yeah. I think back to when you first started going like regularly.
Yeah.
And Cam and I have a friend who she's incredible. She's a couple years younger than us, and she can lift weights. Like she could deadlift.
I don't know who this is, but I'm just gonna yes.
I don't want to say her name.
I get it. No, it's fair. It's fair. Yes, I know who you were talking about.
But she's just incredible in the gym. And I remember you came home from one of your first times, and you were like,
"Oh yeah, I remember this."
You were like, "I'm kind of embarrassed because I saw blank at the gym, and she was out lifting, deadlifting me like.
Well, I went up. I was there. I went up to her. I was like, "Look, I don't do this. Can you show me the form real fast, and I'm just going to start out like the lightest weight that I can without feeling embarrassed." And that's what I did. And now that's not even a problem anymore. But it's one of those things where, it was.
But what a great relation to what 100%. Candice and Lauren have been saying. Yeah. You know, you started out small and now you look back and you think, oh, thank God I started out, you know, without hurting myself.
Yeah.
But I also worked your way up to a point where now people can look to you as an example.
Yeah, it makes me feel very nice.
Well, and that's also a great reminder that it's not a bad thing to be a beginner. And I think a lot of times people get kind of stuck on that point because they expect expert level from themselves on day one. And that's just not realistic. Like nobody starts as an expert. And so it's okay to be a beginner as long as you don't just stay there forever, right? It's okay to ask and say like, hey, how did you do this so I can do this properly? Whether that is the right form for lifting weights or it's taking the next steps in your life or business, whatever that looks like. It's okay to be a beginner. We all started there. Even the most proficient, successful people all started as beginners too.
Yeah, and nobody gets anywhere overnight. And so we have to give ourselves the same grace. And the same thing goes for when we're training or working with other people on teams. We had to learn and go through the growth process. And so we have to extend them that grace and the opportunity to grow and learn and not expect them to also be at level 10 on day one.
You heard it here today, folks. You can ask me any question you want about the gym and I will be able to help you. I'm here for you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Candice and Lauren. What would be the best possible way that our viewers and listeners following our podcast and listening right now, what would be the best way for them to support Aretios?
So you can go over to aretios.com and we have a free monthly newsletter, and that's where you can get our latest insights and ideas and lessons on personal development and growth. And so that's a great way to continue to connect with us. And we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Aretios Official. And we share quick tip videos there, usually under 60 seconds, to give you some different ideas on leadership and personal development to help you grow and stay inspired and become the best version of yourself.